All right, would you open your Bibles with me to John chapter 4? I got kind of stuck this week in John chapter 4. I was probably going to go a little farther and get a few more verses behind us, but something that the Lord said, 4 words that the Lord said, has stuck in me, and I can't get away from it. We know that from the earlier portions of John chapter 4 that Jesus made it a point to get to this well where he knew this Samaritan woman would come. That he made it a point to be there. He made it a point to talk to her. He made it a point to reveal himself to her. He made it a point to save her that day for all eternity. Save her soul. We know that in verse 27, the disciples can't even figure out why he's talking to her. You think about that a little bit. I know that the ministry is young for them, and I know that following this man Jesus is new to them. But he comes along to them and says, hey, follow me, hey, follow me, hey, follow me. And John the Baptist has been preaching, repent and follow the Lord. And you would think that it would be self-evident and obvious why he was talking to her. Let alone the fact that he orchestrated the conversation, made it so he would be there to talk to her. And in verse 27, they marveled that he talked to the woman. Yet no man said, what seekest thou? Keep that in your mind. In verse 29, she leaves her water pot. Well, in verse 28, she leaves her water pot and she takes off in verse 29. And she's sharing the message of Jesus with others. Come see a man is her mantra. Come see a man that told me all things ever I did. And he loved me in spite of my past. And he loved me in spite of my nationality. And he loved me in spite of my ignorance concerning spiritual things. And he loved me and told me who he was. Well, Jesus runs across another dilemma the disciples run across another dilemma in verse 31. In the meanwhile, she's gone. They've been having the little discussion about why did he talk to her? And now she's gone. In the meanwhile, the disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. Been a long day. You sent us to go get food. We've got food. It's time to eat. You need to eat. And of course, what we dealt with last week, verse 32, I have meat to eat that you know not of. His meat, his food, that which sustained him and energized him and moved him and brought satisfaction to his soul was to do the will of the Father. And they didn't understand what he was doing. When he was talking to her, he was doing the will of the Father. And in verse 33, the disciples have another dilemma. First, their dilemma is, why is he talking to her? And the second dilemma is in verse 33. Therefore the disciples said one to another, hath any man brought him aught to eat? Peter, did you bring something? Did somebody else bring? Where did he get food? Did the Samaritan woman bring him food? Where did he get food? And they're not catching what he's putting down. They're not picking it up. Jesus addresses both dilemmas. Number one dilemma is, why is he talking to her? Number two dilemma is, why won't he eat? What's going on? Jesus addresses both dilemmas with two basic points. The first one we dealt with last week. My meat is to do the will of the Father. The first dilemma, why is he talking to her? Why is he not eating? I've got more important things to do. My meat is to do the Father's will. Sometimes that the spiritual things will take priority and precedent over the fleshly things, the temporal things. So he addresses the first point, we dealt with it last week. He addresses both dilemmas. And he addresses it with 2 points. I want to do the Father's will. I need to do the Father's will. This is what satisfies me. This is what energizes me. This is what animates me. And I use that phrase all the time. Something, what animates you? I mean, what moves you? What brings you to life? What brings zeal to your heart? What is it that takes you from, yeah, okay, whatever, to let's go? What animates you? And what animated him was doing the will of the Father. And secondly, the second thing that he addresses is in verse 35. He's addressing both of their dilemmas, and this is the second point of addressing it. The first, doing the will of God. The second, verse 35, say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. Clearly, again, he's using a very natural, in this case horticultural, illustration that their sowing to harvesting is roughly probably 4 months in that region at that time. And he's drawing a parallel that they can easily understand, may have even been in the springtime, seed time realm, and he's able to say, we're here now, and harvest is typically in 4 months, and he could have made that parallel with them. He could have used that as an illustration with them. But the bigger picture is, in my estimation, and the 4 words that I could not get past all week is lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes. Don't limit in your thinking that the harvest is only out there in the future somewhere. Disciples, don't limit in your thinking that my ministry hasn't started yet and the reaping is somewhere out there in the future. Disciples, don't limit your thinking. And remember, he's answering their dilemma. Why is he talking to her, and why won't he eat? There's a harvest that if you'd lift up your eyes, you'd see it. If you'd lift up your eyes, you wouldn't limit your thinking to the idea that the harvest is somewhere down the road. Don't limit, and their other part of their dilemma was, why is he talking to her? Don't limit your thinking about the harvest. Of course, he's illustrating a harvest of souls. Don't limit your thinking about the harvest into the box that you build on the ones that you think are ripe for the saving. That person there would make an awesome Christian. That person over there, no. Anybody that knows the Lord makes an awesome person serving the Lord, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their past, regardless of the rebellion that is in the past. Don't limit, disciples, your thinking as to who I ought to be talking to, or being concerned that she's a Samaritan, or being concerned maybe they know her past, and being concerned about what kind of past she has. Don't limit your thinking. Lift up your eyes. They only saw a sinful woman, a Samaritan at that, and couldn't figure out why he's talking to her. They only saw the temporal needs of the Lord. You need to eat. Why aren't you eating? Why isn't he eating? Did somebody give him some food? They were missing what he was doing. And they were missing the harvest of souls. And the correction, the course correction for that is lift up your eyes. We need to look beyond people's faults and flaws and sins. We need to realize and ask ourselves the question, where would I be had God not worked marvelously and graciously in my life? I've been around people. I don't know that they were believers. They were church members. I don't know that they were believers. But I've been around people that would look at somebody that had got themselves in some kind of trouble. Trouble with the law, trouble with surprise pregnancy, trouble with drugs, trouble. I've seen and heard people say they got themselves into that mess. Let them get themselves out of that mess. Oh, lift up your eyes and see the need of Jesus. We've got to get to the place where we're not surprised when sinners sin. We've got to get to the place when we're not shocked that sinners sin and say, oh, there's no hope for them. They need Jesus. They need the message of hope that comes from knowing Christ as Savior. And it's somewhat surprising to me, and there's probably something in this account that I'm missing, but why the disciples did not more readily see these things. Why were they asking? Why is he talking to her? Why were they so preoccupied with the temporal? And he tells them, lift up your eyes. And those words rung in my heart all week. Lift up your eyes. We need to see people in their need of Christ. We need to see people in a priority that takes precedence over our temporal things. The temporal pressures of life get us busy. And that's part of life, you know. It is a necessity that we work and have jobs and have these financial obligations, and all of those things are just part of life. Eating was part of life, but Jesus said, I'm going to put a priority on talking to this woman. I'm going to put a priority there. Lift up your eyes. Where had their eyes been? Their eyes had been on her and her nationality and her past, and asking the question, why is he talking to her? Wrong question. Where had their eyes been? Why won't he eat? The temporal is important to them. More at that moment than the realization that he's dealing with her soul. Think where their eyes had been. Think where our eyes often are. And we should probably take the same heed that he gave them. Take heed to the same words that he gave them. Lift up your eyes. Take a deeper look at men and their great need of Jesus. There's a passage in Lamentations that the Lord brought to my thinking. Lamentations chapter 3. And I don't think we're doing any violence to the context. We are breaking into it. But there's a thought. And you read the prophet and his compassion and his extreme sorrow for what he sees going on around him. That's what Jeremiah is known for. The Lamentations of Jeremiah. And he says something in verse 51. Mine eye affecteth my heart because of all the daughters of my city. When he looked around, he was brokenhearted. You see this often. I think of it in the prophets regularly. Nehemiah went to spy out the city and the condition of the gates and walls and so on. And he was brokenhearted at what he'd seen. Malachi was brokenhearted at the condition and operation of the priesthood in the temple. When they took the time to look and see what was going on, when you take the time to think what God is worthy of, He's worthy of our best. He's worthy of our obedience. He's worthy of our zeal. He's worthy of that which animates us, as I like to say. It moves us, energizes us. He's worthy of being the one in that position above everything else. And we get so busy. We get our eye off the focus on Him. And the weeping prophet says, mine eye affecteth my heart. What I see breaks my heart. And if we would lift up our eyes, what we would see around us would break our heart. We look at the people of the world. Oftentimes we look at them critically. And there's plenty of justifiable reason for that. Oftentimes we look at them, the people of the world, with great wonder. There's good reason for that. It would seem as though most have lost their minds. But lift up your eyes. Don't be looking like the apostles were looking. Lift up your eyes and think about the emptiness that must be in the hearts of the people of the world on a daily basis. Having a hole in their heart that all of their radicalness and all of their rioting and picketing and feeding the filth of the flesh, all of those, none of that stuff satisfies, which is obvious because they keep pressing the boundaries farther and farther. Their soul is not content. Lift up your eyes and consider the condition of men and women. And I'm telling myself and reminding myself as well. Lifting up our eyes and remembering. And we've only at this moment just mentioned the current condition of their lives. That says nothing of their eternal doom that is coming their way. In Luke, when the rich man dies, this was brought to my attention Sunday. In Luke, when the rich man dies and wakes up in hell, lifts up his eyes. And he said, send a witness to my family, because I don't want them in this awful place. And the response that he got, son, remember. Remember, in life, you had everything. Lazarus had nothing. Remember, in life, you fared sumptuously. Lazarus got the crumbs off your table. We are prone to having our eyes fixed on the temporal and missing the eternal. Lift up your eyes. Think about the rich. Think about the poor. Think about the drunk, the addict. Think about the socially affluent and powerful. Think about the average person who's trying to make ends meet. Think about moms and dads and average families. Think about the loner. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, yesterday. I miss the good old days. I miss the days when some teenager trying to get a little attention had purple hair. I miss the good old days. When the craziest thing some people did was color their hair funny for a while, because it's a whole lot crazier now. But lift up your eyes and see people. Think about the emptiness that you so often hear in those that have so much. It's either never enough, or it's not satisfying because other people want it, or other people befriend me because I have this, and there's a plethora of downsides that they share regularly because they're trying to fill a hole in their heart that only Jesus can fill with stuff, or with alcohol, or with drugs, or with sex, or with all of the stuff that goes on today. Lift up your eyes. They all need the same thing. They need the message of Jesus. That wonderful song that we sang. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Lift up your eyes. See the men and women around you. See the men and women you work next to, live next to, shop with, or wherever your sphere of friends and contacts and sphere of influence is. And don't do what the disciples did. Limit your thinking to the temporal or to cultural things, and that's not a good candidate, but that'd be a better candidate. I don't know why he's over there. Let us lift up our eyes. Men and women that have no idea why their hearts are so empty. And worse than that, men and women that have no idea their eternal doom. May we be like Jeremiah. Mine eyes have affected my heart. And this is the point. It takes a proactive attempt by you and by me to lift up our eyes. Because it's so easy to get in a limiting mindset that the Lord's not going to work there, the Lord's going to work over here, that's not our job. Our job is to share the message of Jesus. Look at our text in verse 35. Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh the harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. And most believe, based on the context and the next couple of verses after the Lord speaking, that the men of Samaria were walking towards him right then. Lift up your eyes and look. And he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. There's plenty of work for all, and all can do something. Paul deals with this thought in 1 Corinthians 3, that there were some following Apollos and there were some following Paul, and they showed their allegiances to the one that they probably were saved under. And he said, look, he's sowing the seed, I'm watering the seed, or maybe I got it the other way around, I'm sowing and he's watering. But God gives the increase. So we're not worried about who's doing the sowing and who's doing the watering and who's the one blessed to do the reaping. God gives the increase. We are just to be busy about the task of lifting up our eyes and sowing and watering. And when the Lord blesses, reaping. Verse 37, herein is that saying true, one soweth, another reapeth. There's plenty of work to go around, and everyone can do something. Well, I can't do this, and you can pray. You can probably encourage through a letter or a card or a text or an email. You can pray. May we lift up our eyes and see the Lord's working. See the need of people that they have, of someone to tell them about the saving power of Jesus. I sent you to reap that whereon ye bestowed no labor. Other men labored, and ye are entered into their labors. And it seems to me he's referring to the prophets and John the Baptist, who had gone before, sowing the seed, and they're now ready to reap. They'll be sowing some seed as well, especially in time. But say not that the harvest is sometime down the road. Harvest is now. Don't think there's someone that gets to the point where they're past my ability to save and fix their broken life and save them for all eternity. Lift up your eyes and see the need of men and women. And I believe he was telling them to lift up their eyes and see that need, but also that there were those that were coming as he was speaking. Verse 39, and many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of that woman which testified, he told me all that ever I did. So when the Samaritans were come unto him, they besought him that he would tarry with them, and he abode there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. But that was initiated and started by that Samaritan woman who left her water pot because Jesus had touched her soul. May we do the same. Have our lives reprioritized so that our primary objective is to reach souls. Praying that the Lord would give opportunity. Praying that the Lord would give words when opportunity arises. Praying that the Lord would give us the grace to have a testimony that when we share our message, that the message rings true, that Jesus has made a difference in our lives. And that we do demonstrate a Christianity worth somebody taking notice of. But not for our own glory, for His. Lift up your eyes. Maybe this spoke more to me than anyone else, but it's all I could get. I studied and studied, and all I could get any liberty with was that. Lift up your eyes. May the Lord help each and every one of us to do just that. And may, as we lift up our eyes, our hearts are affected by what we see. And we give our testimony. You can, and Paul does this at the end of the book of Acts over and over to different people, slightly different ways. But he just says, this is how the Lord saved me. And anyone can tell someone else about how the Lord saved them. Anyone can tell anyone else about how I recognized my lost and sinful condition before God. And that if I died in that condition, I would spend eternity in a place called hell. And that how in God's amazing mercy and love and grace, He reached down and saved my unworthy soul. And you can share with somebody that which has happened to you. And you can share that with some confidence because it happened to you. Let us lift up our eyes. Have our hearts affected by what we see. And tell others of the saving power of Jesus Christ. Let's stand.